Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Into the Rift Podcast, Season 2, Episode 3. I'm your host, Kenny. Joining me is my brother and co-host, Garrett.
Yo!
Today, on this episode, we are going to be talking about the Loveland Frogman of Loveland, Ohio.
They're putting chemicals in the water to turn the freaking frogs gay.
Oh my God. Have you ever been driving around the Little Miami River in southwest Ohio and you just happen to look over and you see a humanoid frog creature climbing over the guardrail with a wand about to blast your ass with a magical spell?
I cast magic missile. Don't worry about the anthropomorphic frog. He's just cosplaying. He's just LARPing.
Yep, it's just a little furry who's not so furry.
Perhaps a little scaly.
So as we said, this takes place in Loveland, Ohio, which is a small town in the southwestern part of the state. It runs right alongside the Little Miami River, and it's a pretty small town. At the 2020 census, it only had a population of around 13,000, so pretty small. The original story happened, or I should say the original sighting happened back in the early 1950s, around 1952. Some sources I've seen say like 1955, others say 1957. So there's some confusion on when exactly this occurred. But the one source I see here, it said that the event actually happened in 1952. It was just reported in 1955. So in this report in 1952, it was about 4 a.m. on a March night. While driving through Branch Hill on his way to Loveland, a businessman saw in the beams of his headlights what appeared to be three men kneeling at the right side of the road. His first impression was that somebody was hurt or some crazy guys were having fun. Curious, he stopped his car and got out for a better look. To his surprise, he discovered that the figures were non-human and about 3 feet tall. They were not green, but rather a grayish color, including their garments. These tight-fitting, stretched over with a lopsided chest, which bulged at the shoulder to the armpit.
Now it just sounds like they're describing me.
Oh my God. Over this bulbishness hung a slender arm, noticeably longer than its opposite member, save for only a fleeting impression of something baggy. The legs and feet were obscured by the weeds and brush. Their heads were ugly, said the businessman, reminding him of a frog's face, mostly because of the mouth which spanned in a thin line across a smooth gray face. While Honeycutt thought the eyes without brows seemed normal, the nose was indistinct, and the pat of the head had a painted-on hair-like effect, like a plastic doll. It was corrugated or like rolls of fat running horizontally over a bald head. The middle biped and the one closest to him was first seen, with his arms upraised. They were raised about a foot or so above the head, he said, and holding a dark chain or a stick, which emitted blue-white sparks jumping from one hand to the other. As he approached, he said the biped then lowered its arm with the chain as if to tie it around his ankles. He said he wanted to get closer, but by the time he had reached the front fender of his car, the little man made a slight, unnatural move towards him, as if motioning me not to come any closer. For about 3 minutes, the businessman said he stood still, just watching, too amazed to be afraid. The next thing he remembered, he was on his way to Fritz's office. So that's like the main story. Supposedly, this happened to a Robert Honeycutt. However, there's been multiple variations of the story. There's been a version where it's the man, Robert Honeycutt. There's been a couple of variations where it's either a traveling businessman or a traveling salesman. And there's some versions of the story where they're, instead of along the bank, they're like under a bridge or they're on top of a bridge. It depends on where you hear it from. The thing is, could be by a bridge, but there's numerous bridges in that town. It's hard to narrow down which one it is, or, if this even happened, because there's so many variations to this story. Was this actually an eyewitness sighting, or was this just like an urban legend? And as you can see, there's variation between they were frog-like, but they only because of their mouth, but they didn't look like a big humanoid frog like what's described in the later encounters. So, what did this dude see? Was it like aliens? Was it a gray? It seems like the next thing he remembered, he was also on his way to another office. So that's like, does he have some missing time? Did they zap him with that magic wand thing to make him neuralize like Men in Black?
They hit him with that forget me stick.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely giving me like kind of the same vibes as like the melon heads that we covered in like season 1. It's the urban legend vibe, you know, there's no real definitive story, but it's prevalent enough to still be known, you know, many decades after the fact.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, you hear about a big old frog with a wizard on, you know, just over there casting spells and shit. I mean, most people would be like, yeah, that's interesting enough for me to remember.
Right?
Big old bipedal frog just going, you know, magic missile, you know, or some shit.
Yeah.
Also, I wasn't aware that there was free of the entities. I just assumed it was just like a one-off event with like just a singular entity.
No, so like the legend here, the first sighting had 3 humanoid or bipedal beings. They were only like remotely frog-like and that they had long, thin mouths. 20 years later, there were 2 other separate sightings that we're going to get into. So the big sightings that everyone knows about for the Loveland Frogman happened 20 years later in 1972. At 1 a.m. on March 3rd, 1972, a police officer named Ray Shockey was driving along Riverside Drive heading into Loveland.
What a name. It sounds like a 1970s era New York punk scene name. That name Shockey. Sounds like some dude who would be like a Dollar General ripoff of the Sex Pistols, you know, kind of thing.
Oh my God. So he was heading into Loveland. He claimed to have been driving carefully due to it being icy. A creature scurried across the front of the road right in front of his vehicle. So he stopped. He had the creature fully illuminated in his headlights. So he said the creature was about 3 to 4 feet tall, 50 to 75 pounds, and had leathery skin like a lizard or a frog. The creature was crouched like a frog, but then it stood erect, and it stared directly at him. It then climbed over the guardrail, back down towards the river. Later, Officer Shockey's fellow officers claimed to find scratch marks on the guardrail, but there wasn't any photographic evidence to actually support that claim. Then 2 weeks later, on St. Patrick's Day, another police officer, Mark Matthews, claimed to encounter the creature. In a similar fashion, he saw something crouched alongside the ice-slickened road. He intended to remove what he thought was a dead or an injured animal from the side of the road. So he stopped the car and exited, and that's when the creature lurched up from its crouch. Supposedly, Officer Matthews drew his sidearm and discharged his weapon at the creature. Afterwards, the creature hobbled towards the guardrail, climbing over it and out of sight. His description of what he saw matched Officer Shockey's, except he said it had a tail.
More of a tadpole stage. Maybe this is like a juvenile frogman.
Right.
And yeah, I would proceed to ventilate if I pulled up on something like that myself. I mean, I'm about to stitch you from heel to asshole if you start walking towards me at all.
Oh my God.
Especially if you start waving around that little magic stick. Pause. No diddy. I mean his wizard wand, not his, well, you know. I guess that's why they call him the Frog Man.
Oh.
Start waving on that wand. All I can think of is, be like, the officer, he pulls up to the precinct. He's over there, he's talking to the chief. It has a full Monty Python moment. He turned me into a newt. A newt? I got better.
I got better.
Yeah. Be like, what spells you think the little reptilian man's slinging?
Who knows?
I cast Narcan. I ruined your high. Okay, so hear me out. So this happened around the river, correct?
Yes.
And let's just, for a minute here. So, creature, about 3 foot tall, all sort of shit, carrying around what looks like a wand or at least some kind of stick with a light on it. What if he just shot a kid playing with in a trash bag, trying to make like a you know, like a scuba suit?
Well, I'm assuming if it was like kid, it probably just would have dropped.
Well, he said he shot at it. Didn't say if he hit it because he didn't say about any blood or any sort of biological matter left behind. Just that he shot at it and it scurried away, which I love the word it used. It scurried. Hear me out. 3 foot tall. What if he just shot a kid?
What if you just shot a kid? Oh my God. Well, it wouldn't have been the first time or the last time that a police officer shot somebody.
God dang it, Sparky, you shot another hair lip.
Oh my God. But yeah, between the two officers there, they both saw something, supposedly, that was 3 to 4 feet tall, around 50 to 75 pounds, frog or lizard like. But another thing is like, is that something that they actually saw? Because later on, Officer Matthews,
Where's Dave, man?
he later recanted his story, and he said that, oh, I didn't actually see that it was actually just a big iguana.
Excuse me? And what time of year was this?
Mid-March, and it's cold enough to have icy roads.
Yeah, exactly. And you're telling me you're in Ohio, and it was an iguana. You smoking
it gets
dick?
cold.
Like you must be smoking dick if you're sick, and I'm believing that. I honestly would believe it more. You saw an interdimensional frog being before you saw a iguana in the middle of freaking an ice storm in Ohio.
He said, I know no one would believe me, so I shot it. And then he said that it was a large iguana, about 3 or 3.5 feet long. The animal was missing its tail, which is why he didn't immediately recognize it. He said the thing was half dead anyway, so I shot it.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying this is entirely impossible at this point, but he said free foot with no tail, iguana.
Well, his report said that what was different between his and Officer Shockey's is that it had a tail.
Oh.
So in his story, it had a tail, or at least when he first reported it.
Okay. But again.
But then later he recanted and said it was missing its tail.
Yeah. So you're changing the story a lot. I think it's more like you faced a ton of ridicule and we're like, nah, dog, I swear, it was just an iguana. Oh.
Do you think that's what it was? Like, you think, and so instead of just trying to defend his reputation for like forever, he just finally gave up. It was just an iguana.
I'd say that's highly probable if this is even at all, if this story holds water, like if it's true. I would say, yeah, more than likely it's like he faced a ton of ridicule and decided to change the shit. Because, I mean, okay, let's have the possibility of somebody, I don't know, they got out of this freaking Sears catalog at that point. They ordered a freaking iguana they found in the back of a freaking comic book. Entirely possible. We've had family members who owned monkeys from that way. Just the idea, maybe it's that. Maybe he just shot a monkey that he got out of the Sears catalog. But just a monkey out there with a flashlight that's like the battery's dying, so it just casts a dim glow, but not a direct beam, and he just, pow! But, yeah, okay, so got iguana. We'll reassess the whole story as being truthful. It's an iguana. How did it get to Ohio? Did someone just buy it out of the back of a comic book? Or for those who don't know, yes, you could do that. We've had a family member who owned monkeys and all that kind of shit at the time. Actually, around the same time period. The idea of it still having enough energy in an icy conditions for a reptile to still be able to really run around. It had to be like just getting out of someone's care recently, like within like 30 minutes.
Supposedly, he said he figured that it was living near the pipes that released water that was used for cooling the ovens in the boot factory as a way to stay warm.
Well, that's more probable. But if you just shot some dude's pet, iguana, which is a reptile, and this is sitting on icy roads, that dude probably heard you shoot it. Which means you got an awkward conversation to have with a dude who's trying to get his pet back and you just ventilated it.
Well, he also said in his original report that it climbed over a guardrail and kept his eyes on him while it was slinking away towards the river. And it's like,
iguanas don't do that.
If it's in the mid-30s, the thing is, even if it was just, it's going to lose its body heat pretty quick.
Yeah, it's going
to slow down really fast.
Yeah, if it's even moving at all, it's going to be lethargic to the point of it's not probably going to climb. Because if anybody has seen, like, if we have any listeners in Florida or any areas with iguanas, when it gets cold out, them bitches fall from the trees. So it's like, if they can't even hold on and stay still, you think it's really gonna be running around on ice and climbing over guardrails and shit? And why it's an iguana? Why'd it have to crawl over the guardrail? Why didn't it just scurry under? Again, I'm using the word scurry because he did it. It's a fun word to say.
Right.
You also got to do the little finger movements when you scurried.
So who knows what they actually saw? I don't believe that the first officer, Shockey, I don't know if he's ever actually recanted his account like Matthews has. So who knows what they actually saw?
Yeah, and there's a bit of variation with like the traveling businessman slash salesman, whatever, with like the free entities and the chain and all that. That was just freaking bizarre. So we have a possibility of 3 or more of these entities if they are, not iguanas in Ohio. It's a weird one to come up with, but what's weirder? Somebody makes up a story about a frogman, or here's an iguana living in the pipes in Ohio.
Yeah.
And this is also in the 50s, so it's like, or was this the one in 72?
These are the ones that happened in 1972.
Okay, so more probable that somebody would know of a iguana, but it's a very, at that point, niche animal to bring up.
It is.
Yeah, because pet reptiles really not that common in the 70s, I don't think.
Probably not.
I mean, for a guy in Ohio to just be like, you know what I want? An iguana. I'm just going to go order it. Unless the dude was just like stoned to the gills and found it in the back of a comic book, like I mentioned before. But who just in Ohio is like, in the 70s, is just like, yeah, an iguana. That'd be tight.
Yeah, who knows?
Like, how'd it get there? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, either someone bought it and released it, or they were just thinking it was cold out and, it is going to die from the cold, so who cares? But
even then, like, how did it get in Ohio? Is it a pet? Is it just there? Is it a lab animal?
Yeah, I don't know.
There,
I mean, it could.
Oh, there we go. There's the theory. The Loveland Frogman is an escaped lab animal with the 1950s sci-fi shit. So, of course, it grew out of some metamorphic soup.
Nice.
Took one sip, grew legs, started walking around, slinging spells. They're putting chemicals in the water to turn the freaking frogs magic.
But those aren't the last supposed sightings of the Loveland Frogman. Supposedly, back in 2000, so we jump forward another 28 years, this person bought a house by the Loveland Castle Museum in 2000. It was perched above the ravine and creek, and the back of the house dropped off very steeply. There would have been enough room for a man or a bipedal person to stand behind the house, but the basement windows were eye level and the first floor was quite far up from the place where one could stand. The person who wrote this statement says, the reason I point this out is that because it was a very small house, we had to use the basement for our 2 boys' bedroom. They kept complaining that something kept looking in the window at them, and my husband and I laughed it off at first. It was a wooded setting, very rural and beautiful, and very dark at night, having no streetlights. So it seemed funny that we were thinking that something was watching them. We told them maybe it was just a deer, and then went about our business. One night, however, I woke up hearing a weird sound just outside our bedroom window on the first floor. It faced out the back of the house, and I was puzzled as to what it could be because it sounded like a man breathing heavily. I started to sit up and realized that whatever it was looking in my window just inches from my head, and I was terrified. I did not look out because I knew that I would see it, and I kept feeling something urging me to look. We would often hear squeaking noises, screeching, not like an owl, and a crying baby. I woke my husband up, and he said whatever it was, it would have to have been 10 feet tall to look in our window. I couldn't sleep that night, but whatever had been there, it had moved on. I didn't mention it to the kids the next day. The boys came up from the basement shaken and seeing the red glowing eyes the night before. They're every bit as big as red road reflectors, and they heard heavy breathing, and the hair on their body stood up on end. They said this was only one experience that they had in Loveland, Ohio, and it's right by the little Miami River. They had other kinds of paranormal experiences as well. So this person didn't get a good look at it, but like, who's to say there wasn't another creature kind of like what they saw, whether it was the first round in the 50s or the 70s, that was like coming out of the same river and deciding to like menace a family.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it sounds almost like Fae-like activity.
Yeah, maybe there's like a frog fey creature.
Yeah, just chilling on his toadstool, then decides to, I don't know, to get that family out. I don't know. Maybe the kids are messing up his little squatting hole, but it seems weird that
Right.
he's been like particularly messing with the kids at first, and then but the 10 foot tall part though, that seems more like maybe he was climbing up. Because if it's 3 foot tall in the other stories, unless this bitch kept growing for 20 years, which at that point,
Yeah.
where are you hiding? But because
Yeah.
10 foot frogman with a wizard staff is a little bit more noticeable than 3 foot tall little frogman wizard.
Right.
But another point, I get that it's different time period. Now everybody's worried about creepy dudes trying to abduct kids back then. It's pretty unheard of. But the fact that your kids come up to you and they're like, "There's somebody or something outside our window and it's watching us at night," I would be a little bit more concerned than like, okay, it'd be one thing to be like, "There's a monster in my closet. I heard a noise when I wanted to get water." Yeah, so that's one thing. That's be like, it's kids. They don't. The house is settling. Blah blah blah. Or it was a tree branch that was brushing against the window. But instead, it's just, "There's a man outside breathing heavy on my window, Mom," and you're just like, "That's probably a deer." It's just
Yeah.
you're just like,
And
"Nah,
big
it's nothing."
red glowing eyes.
Yeah, it's nothing. Nah, don't worry about it. Go back to bed.
But another thing with the glowing eyes, there was the most recent sighting, and this one was actually more of a direct sighting, actually took place in 2016. Kid at the time, name is Sam Jacobs, was playing Pokemon Go with his girlfriend, and this took place in mid-August. So he said he crossed the train tracks to the bank of Lake Isabella when he spotted something strange. And he says that we saw a huge frog near the water, not in the game of Pokemon Go. This was an actual giant frog. And if anyone's played Pokemon Go, you realize if you had half a brain cell, you wouldn't confuse that. But anyway, I digress. He said the thing stood up and walked on its hind legs. He goes, "I realize this sounds crazy, but I swear on my grandmother's graves, this is the truth." Jacobs claimed the frog stood 4 feet tall, and he had a dark, blurry picture of like a frog-like silhouette with like glowing eyes, like eye shine. He says, "I'm not quite sure if this was a frogman or just a giant frog. Either way, I've never seen anything like this before." Well, I mean, if it stood up and walked on its hind legs, I'd say that's more frogman than just frog.
Yeah, because when was the last time you saw a normal frog stand upright and just kind of eyeball your ass like it's posting up, like on a stoop, like waiting for you to cross its freaking path, like
Or dancing around like Looney Tunes with a top hat.
or that. But like again, like okay, so it's just a normal giant frog. Yeah, they just stand upright and eyeball you, like normal frogs.
And even just seeing a 4 foot tall frog, a 4
Yeah,
4 foot long frog, like
exactly. I be like, dude, this is Ohio, so like normal frogs fit around the size of a grown man's palm versus, oh, it's like titty height. It's like like it's like upright.
something's not quite right here.
Yeah, no, my homie, you're smoking crack.
Yeah, who knows? But the picture it's kind of like a, I don't know, the stereotypical blurry photo
Yeah.
that a lot of like cryptid sightings have. But you can clearly see like in the water, there's a frog-like silhouette. It has two very large eyes that are glowing from like eye shine from like the flash or whatever of the camera. And you know how whenever you see on video or a picture, when an animal has eye shine, the eyes look a lot bigger. It's kind of like that. If it was a hoax or
Yeah, because
the guy actually sees something and got a picture of it.
if it's not just forced perspective of a frog that's like taken close in the evening, because it's like blurry, typical photo, like you said, it's very shadowy. You can't really get a lot of detail. Let's say it's just forced perspective photo, and you just made a story up with it because you heard about the urban legends. It's still just it seems very weird for you to mention certain things, because the whole like being 4 foot tall thing, and then just be like, it's just a big frog.
It's going to be like, it's not just like a 4 foot tall frog. Amphibians haven't existed in thousands of years back to like, was it the Sarcopian period? A very long time ago.
Yeah. Oh, so maybe it is a big froggy ghost.
Yeah, it turns out it's it's just a,
Like a time slip situation, or maybe he went back in
yeah,
time playing Pokemon Go, and like, ooh, 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 big frog.
yeah, he accidentally had a time slip to the Squamozoic period.
Yeah. That, or he found a froggy wizard getting jiggy with it.
Getting jiggy with it.
And skittering.
But
Sorry, was it
who knows?
skittering or scurrying? Yeah, scurrying. Yeah, he was scurrying and getting jiggy with it.
Start playing some disco.
Yeah, or Will Smith. Regardless, this whole situation is very bizarre.
Yeah. Do you think that people actually saw a cryptid, or do you think that this was all an urban legend that's made up? Like, what are your thoughts?
Honest thoughts is that this is more than likely just urban legend, but the photo, it seems like, could have been either possibly forced perspective, or like maybe it could have just been like one of his homies down there in the creek holding up freaking car reflectors. You know, just palming it on his head like freaking Pan's Labyrinth with some reflectors.
Yeah.
It will give you that silhouette if anybody's seen the picture. It looks like you were just like palming like two like orange road reflectors on your head and like staring up at a bank.
And maybe with it being like close to sunset, it was just dark enough to obscure their image.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
you're talking 2016 cell phone cameras, which are very hit or miss.
Yeah. Not as good as what we have now.
Yeah, I mean, in low lighting, cell phone cameras, still most of them suck ass. I mean, you get a nice perspective going. I mean, for example, right now, obviously no one else can see this, but I am wearing like all black. I'm sitting in a room that has black curtains behind me, and I'm in a black chair. I look like a floating head. So it's just like, I mean, that's on my S25 Ultra. So older phones look like potatoes. I mean, it's just nothing but noise from the image. So like,
Yeah. And this is a pretty noisy image.
yeah. So it seemed it would be very easy to like fake one, or it could be a forced perspective photo of a frog, or it could be superimposed,
Yeah. Who knows?
or it could be an interdimensional frogman getting jiggy with it, as one does.
That too. In any case, though, it's kind of become like a local mascot for the town. So like now there's even like a Frogman festival. It's gonna happen actually this year again, March 2nd and March 1st and 2nd.
Which I would be very interested in attending because, of course, the Frogman is cool. Like, he is one of the coolest. But the story itself is very, yeah, I'm not buying a dog.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of small towns to have some kind of story like this are leaning into it to embrace like cryptid tourism. Like obviously Point Pleasant has the famous Mothman Festival every September, and that's bringing a lot of money into the town. And maybe Loveland will get a portion of that with their little Frogman Festival every year.
Yeah, and that would be really cool because I live in a very small town, and the only creepy cryptid we have is the homeless guy who wears trash bags on his leg and eats unrefrigerated hot dogs out of his pocket. I am not joking. He's been living in the same like spot of woods for 14 years. This man isn't, well, actually he might be dead now, but I met him when I was working in the park service. And yes, he lives out there by choice. He's not homeless. Like, he's just crazy. We just call him Crazy Gary. He eats animal crackers and unrefrigerated hot dogs only. And wears trash bags on his legs. He's also like 74. Well, was. He's probably dead now because he got trapped in a porta-john in the winter like a couple times. But
Oh god.
yeah, he got snowed in. But that's our local cryptid. And these people got the Frogman, so I'm a little jealous because magical frogs.
Magical Frogs is a lot more interesting. The Forg Wizard is a lot cooler than the,
Yes, Forg Wizard is a lot more cash money than Crazy Gary.
yes. What other thoughts do you have?
Well, I did notice I misspoke when I was talking about the one story with the looking into the windows. That was in 2000, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said 1970. So to recant a lot of what I was saying with the mom, Yeah, that bitch should have known better. It was 2000. We had already had the missing kids on the milk carton incident. Like, this is well known that kids get abducted. Like, this is after John Wayne Gacy. This is after freaking Ed Kemper. This is after, like, all these other crazy some bitches. Like, and you're just like, it's probably nothing. It's a prowler in the window at your children.
Yeah.
And you're just like, nothing. It's fine. Ain't nobody out here. It's like, bitch, excuse me. I guarantee you somebody at some point knows where you live. You, the phone book, bitch, you know, you got your name, got your address. Somebody just got to follow your ass and be like, oh, they got kids. And a dumb mom, apparently.
God. Apparently.
Meanwhile, you're like, oh, it's the crazy frog man. It's a chomo trying to get your damn kids. Yeah, so I recant it was probably nothing thing. No, bitch, you dumb. It was a prowler.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly was going on in that case, but it being in the same area as all these other sightings on the same river, it makes me think that maybe it was some kind of cryptid. Who knows?
Yeah.
Overall, I think it's a fun little story.
Oh yeah, I dig it. I love it a lot. Freaking frog wizards, that's tight. But but if I was gonna, like, you know, be objective with it and be like, is it real? More than likely not. But is it entertaining?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I like the idea of a cop trying to ventilate a freaking frog wizard. But
Yeah, that is a.
let's say again. Let's say it out loud. Frog wizard. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
And so, what would any of your theories be on this? Like, as far as, like, is it an urban legend? How would somebody fake it? What were they really seeing?
Maybe they saw something they misidentified and went with it. But some of the stories, like the first story from the 50s, has too many inconsistencies
Yeah, it's very weird
to make sense. Like, it looks like it maybe something happened, and then it's kind of like a game of telephone where like the everything got spread and like details got changed. So who knows what actually happened on the original sighting. For the two sightings with the police officers, so many weird things have to happen. I mean, police officers are supposed to be trained observers. They're supposed to be able to see something in an event and then make a report about it, about what they saw, and be as accurate as they can.
Yeah. So, granted, this is small town 1950s, but again, yeah, like for one, most of these men were probably veterans. I mean, you're only 10 years removed from 15 removed from World War II. I mean, I don't know if it mentioned the age of the officer, but like most guys would be trained observers, like you said. I mean, you're talking like the depiction of a 4-foot tall frog wizard with his wand versus, I don't know, maybe he's just saw some kid with Down syndrome with like a kraut helmet with a flashlight.
Oh God. Anyway, though, I think it's definitely an interesting story. I wish there would be more details to come out. That would be really cool. Or maybe, maybe in the future, someone else will have another sighting and we'll get more insight into what the Loveland Frogman is.
Yeah, so fingers crossed we get another flap of frogmen. Catch them bitches in 8K.
Anyway, if you're near the Little Miami River in Ohio and you happen to see a frog wizard,
yes,
let us know. And if you've enjoyed this episode of Into the Rift podcast, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And if you have any other really cool stories, let us know. Anyway, I hope you have a good night.
And if you have any old cameras sitting around that, take some nice potato quality photos, send them our way, because I would really be interested in seeing them. It'd be pretty funny. Let's do some fake frog wizard cryptid photos. Peace.